You do not want to when you go about. Well, retraining is a very serious issue because a lot of folks are losing their jobs right now, and you've got a double whammy happening here. One, there is a segment of the workforce that you can in fact retrain, but then you have another segment of those who are losing their jobs who are 50 years and over.
Yeah.
Not exactly very marketable, even after you take the time to
But
retrain them.
that's not true. In fact, one of the things that we have to recognize in the society is that there's a creeping problem. Um, if you looked at the National Insurance last actuarial review, you would find that between the period 2010 and 2020, some 69,633 people are going to reach the age of 60. What that means is that if you take that level of individual outside of the system is going to crash because you do not have sufficient young people coming into the system to replace them. But more than that, the people that are coming into the system, the jobs that they're looking for, the tools that they have, their relevance to some of the jobs, there's a mismatch. Millennials coming in don't operate with paper. They basically operate with iPads and phones and technology. And therefore, in that sense, there is a mismatch between what is taking place on the demographic side, on the economy, and what needs to happen. And I think there's another challenge that the government is going to face very, very shortly, because in other countries, what they have done is that by legislation, they've changed the retirement age.
Yes, upward.
So, I mean, I think Barbados, if I'm not mistaken, has moved it to about 73. Because when you look at the data,
73.
when you look at the data, the next 10 years after 2020 to 2030, there's another 69,000 people who would reach the same 60. And when you look at it beyond that, so that for the next 30 years, the whole baby boomers group and thereafter is going to find themselves inside there. And the issue with that is at 60, they're very productive.
Yes, everybody's living longer. You've given a whole different opportunity, a different look on the 69,000 plus who will be leaving the workplace. Because Heather, before you actually went there, the thinking was that when I hear, for instance, in the United States, this slightly upward climb of 1 or 2 years of retirees to receive full benefits and so on, I thought it was a way of extending the payment by the government of these benefits. You were saying, in fact, that we're ending up with a loss of qualified people in a number of areas.
Absolutely.
So then it would be fruitful. It would be beneficial for for the government here in Trinidad and Tobago to put aside money and a structure to retrain. Seriously.
Absolutely. The other thing about Trinidad and Tobago, which I think we do not exploit, is the fact that progressive governments over the last couple of years have focused a lot on educating our people. We have a very educated population, and that is one of the reasons why companies coming into Trinidad and Tobago find that this is the place to be. Now, that means, therefore, that there's a whole market that we could exploit. Well, shouldn't use the word of exploit, but we could look at to put our people into them. For example, if I take Suriname as an example, Suriname is now at the beginning of its oil and gas business. We have sufficient resources here to actually go across to Suriname and help them sort out their issues. Guyana is similarly challenged, and we have the resources here. I was in Africa some time ago, and they were saying to me that the same things that we have done here with UTT, for example, which is creating a university in which we can train people for the jobs that are emerging. They want a similar kind of facility because they're also in the business of oil and gas, and they are at the beginning. So Trinidad and Tobago, in my view, is not in a difficult place. We are simply in a place where some group need to sit down, think through the global opportunities, and lead it. Unfortunately, it has to be led by the government. And I'll give you the example in Africa. So in Africa, for example, when you go and you look at oil and gas business, you see a company like Sinopec, which is the equivalent of a Petrotrin. going there and negotiating from exploration right down to the market. What we have been doing is that we have been going somewhere midstream and asking for some work. That doesn't work. What needs to happen is that the state needs to take Pt.2 and send Pt.2 out into foreign countries. But when you go, carry the entire energy sector with you, because there will be a requirement for doing that, and we have the skill sets. And it means that Pt.2, by virtue of a global strategy, can move from being a loss maker, in my view, to a company that can add serious value and actually create flows back into Trinidad and Tobago on the basis of the work that they have to do.
By selling and
those
exporting your
opportunities
expertise,
and
yes.
those opportunities are in fact available, and they are in fact doable.
It is currently 24 minutes away from 12 o'clock. My guest is a former government minister and lecturer, Mr. Conrad Enil. It is good to have you here this morning. I want to go into the area of the unemployment figures that are here now. You said 3 years, it is going to be tough. You mentioned some things that can kind of ease that pressure, one of them being that we take our expertise and we start exporting it, etc., and we retrain our people. But what is the current number, the best number you have now for unemployment, and where you anticipate this will go during this this period of economic difficulty? Let's put it that way.
I've looked at something that Professor Theodore has produced, and I think that he has said that the possibility exists that there could be an employment figure of about 150,000 people. Now, what does that mean? I think what it means basically is that the current jobs that exist will not be supportable in its current form. However, those of us that study Caribbean economies understand that there is an informal economy that exists that in some instances is not measured, but quite frankly, it responds every time we have issues like this.
Detail this informal economy.
Well, for example, the plumber. For example, the gardener. For example, the person who would actually bring food and sell it. Those kinds of individuals who, on a one-on-one basis, provide services to a group, but they do it over time. All the cumulative effect of that allows for people to feed their families, allow for things to happen. But it is not done as part of the formal economy. It simply happens. And it doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes it happens 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But those kinds of arrangements, and there's some work that we are doing right now to try and understand to what extent that kind of resilience, if you will, by our people has allowed us to continue to survive in spite of issues like this.
Many times folks look at impending economic hard times and all the inquiries and solutions are expected coming out of government. But as you have articulated a moment ago, private industry's got a big part to play in this. It's in this area that I asked the question about those who have been displaced because of these times, as they have their mortgages, for instance. I've lost my job. Oh, I lost my job. I got another one 2 months later on, but I'm making way less than I did before. Yet my arrangements for my mortgage is fixed.
Yes.
What is the role of the banking sector to play in this tough layoff climate?
Well, the short answer is that the motive for the banks are not social. They are simply
Dollar bill.
dollars and cents, and it's return on capital. And therefore, what we find happening at this time is that the role of support organizations of people like credit unions now come front and center to meet the gap that the banks are not able to fulfill. So if I have a house and I have a mortgage, more than likely I will lose it. It doesn't mean that I can't buy another one at a lower cost or I have to go somewhere else. But what you find is that in many instances, because the circumstances have changed, your circumstances will change as well, unless you would have prepared for it, or unless you do something to create for you the circumstances to continue to the style that you've grown accustomed to. And unfortunately, people who are on fixed income and who have spent a lot of their lives in one sector, in one job, and that sector basically, by virtue of external issues, no longer exists, and they don't have the ability or the mental attitude to move on, to find themselves in difficulty.
Or
And
they
one-
find themselves also in the new in the new coin of the realm where you don't have a permanent job but a contract job.
Well, for many years, the notion of a permanent job is really a non-issue, because a job is really based on two things. One, whether the sector continues to exist, and that changes on the basis of external environment. And in a real sense, therefore, it has to do with your own marketability, your ability to switch, to add value, to create value for individuals. Because those individuals who can create value will find themselves in something. I mean, one of the reasons why I could talk about this is because in 2010, I lost my job. My boss called an election and we lost. And I got up one morning and found that I had no job.
I've got me an MBA economics. I've got
I have everything.
I have this management and finance, and I am
everything.
without a job now. What do I
Absolutely.
do?
So what do I do? And unfortunately, when you're in the politics, all the private sector companies, unless you were the owner of them, basically decides that you're toxic, and therefore nobody says, hey, yeah, nice guy, but okay, bye-bye. So what do? You basically decide, okay, what are the things for which you can add value, and you basically do it. So I found myself in a situation where, based on my knowledge, an opportunity presented itself where I could teach. And I found that teaching was something that was extremely interesting. It was a new dimension. And what it did is that it brought me into the world of academia, where I can now shape thoughts and views, which was very exciting to me.
Monocareer no longer exists.
You know,
You got to get
absolutely.
yourself able to move around. All right, so it's a case of the individual taking upon themselves to understand that you must keep yourself marketable, which means part of your planning must be self-retraining.
Absolutely correct.
And not wait for it. That is a word for the wise for those who are 50 and over, or those who are just getting into the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Because even to say that, I mean, every year for the last couple of years, I am the major speaker at the Ghana Gas Forum Conference in Africa, where we talk simply about energy. Now, again, that's a function that happened. Somebody asked me to come and talk to them. I did, and they've been asking me to come back every year since then. And the other thing that they want us to look at is, can we create for them some kind of educational kind of facility that allows for them to transfer skills into the system. So I'm saying to you that there are things that are happening. There are opportunities that are available. You simply have to recognize that what you were in before no longer exists, and you move on.